Still figuring out life? Good. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. I'm Mary Choi Kelly, PhD, mom, leadership coach, and C-suite veteran with 30 years of helping leaders thrive. On this podcast, Fresh Out and Figuring It Out, we give young adults the mic so they can share their stories and everyone listening can understand who they truly are and what's on their minds. We're also showing the real side of young men, one that defies stereotypes, so that we can rewrite the story together and help every young adult, both men and women, grow into confident, compassionate leaders who know their worth and lead with heart. Follow the show. We're figuring it out together, one story at a time. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fresh Out and Figuring It Out. I have a really great guest today. His name is Evan Gold, and I will introduce him in a moment. Before we do that, life is all about choices. So we begin every episode with a would you rather question. So I have one for you, Evan, if you're ready.
Okay, yeah, give it to me.
All right. Would you rather be remembered for one big thing or loved for a lot of small things?
I think for me, and maybe you'll find out more about this later, just with the kind of person I am, I think the one big thing would totally be it for me.
All right. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit without giving away too much of the story?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I row for Berkeley, and like every year we're trying to win. And that's just kind of the way I like to live. And so I like the idea of like a crowning achievement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, great. So thanks for joining, first of all. I know that you're a student athlete and your time is precious. You guys are very, very busy. So I really appreciate you spending some time with me. And it's been really fun getting to know you through Conor. And you guys were in a program training in Craftsbury, Vermont, and you became fast friends. So I love getting to know his friends, meeting them, and I felt really fortunate to be able to see the two of you race in Ontario. And I had to tell you a funny story. Of course, I love taking pictures and posting pictures of my kids and the family. So after you guys completed your race, I posted a picture of the two of you, and I got so many comments and questions from my friends asking, how tall is that guy? I mean, because you towered over Conor like a giant, and most people know that Conor's fairly big. He's 6'3". So the biggest question I got from everyone on that post was, how tall is he?
Okay, well, I'm 6'7", and on my team that doesn't feel that huge, but I guess walking among a normal population, that's pretty big.
Yeah. Okay. So 6'7" is tall.
Yeah. I think so.
Okay.
Although it doesn't
All
feel
right.
that way to me because there's some 7-footers on my team. So
Yeah, no, I know the rowing sport. I always thought basketball players were tall. I grew up watching Conor play basketball, and now I go to these regattas and I'm like, wow, these people are really tall. So let's jump in. I know that you are a junior at Cal Berkeley, and we already know that you are on the men's varsity crew team. But if you could spend a little bit of time just introducing yourself to the audience, that would be great.
yeah, so I am a golden bear, but it hasn't always been that way. I actually grew up on Stanford campus. My dad's a radiologist, and my parents actually met there as undergrads. And so I grew up swimming in Palo Alto. I was really shaped by the youth sports scene there, and it just a lovely place to grow up. Super fortunate. Amazing public schools, and I had a lovely experience.
Okay, wonderful. I know that there's pros and cons to growing up anywhere, right? And in this life, every situation has its pros and cons. And many people listening might think, well, that sounds like a pretty sweet situation. So you grew up in Palo Alto, your parents met at Stanford, your dad is a professor at Stanford. So tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up in that kind of environment.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it is a super fortunate environment to grow up in. There's some really cool stuff happening there. A lot of my friends' parents are exceptional leaders, exceptional scientists. But with that, there's kind of this flip side that I think a lot of my friends and I experienced going through high school of just a lot of pressure, because a lot of like our parental figures succeeded, and are just brilliant and geniuses, and not every kid is the same way. And so there's this kind of expectation that you'll match your parents and you'll go to a top five school and you'll be doing groundbreaking research. And it just didn't work that way for every kid. Not every kid was interested in that. Not every kid matched that. And I know it was the same way with me. My dad wasn't an athlete growing up, and I'm not an electrical engineer.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's got to be an intense kind of a bubble with, like you said, not only the um, you know, the name of Stanford and kind of that area and all of the technology and everything that's going on there, and then you get all these parents who have expectations, and I think all parents want to provide a better life for their children than what they had. And in many ways, you almost have to ask yourself, like, what's better than what they've had? Like, how do you even meet that expectation? Nonetheless, think about doing better than that. So, how did that impact you?
Totally. I mean, there is that flip side of my parents, same as many parents, want to provide like an opportunity to have the like same opportunities they did, if not more. But the flip side of that is I want to make my parents happy. I want to allow myself to meet those expectations. I want to give myself those opportunities. I want to use all of their support to really do big things. Um, and so there is kind of this expectation, and I talk about it with my parents, like they want me to be in the first varsity boat, um, and I'm competing against 7 foot tall guys from Italy, um,
And
and
oftentimes Olympians, right? I mean, Cal is a really strong program, and I'm sure they're recruiting some very, very high level talent internationally.
totally. I mean, it's just kind of the Bay Area, and even more specifically Palo Alto, and even my high school gun, notoriously bubbles, um, where it feels like you're sinking, you're drowning, um, because everyone else there is so talented and so smart, when actually you're doing just fine. Um,
Oh, you're probably doing better than fine, but the benchmark is so high. I know that there's a lot of issues, especially now that I think is coming out more to the open around some of the issues and the mental health challenges and suicide rates in South Korea. Because there's that similar pressure that starts at a very, very young age in Korea. It's really like if you don't get into the right junior high school, then you're not going to the right high school, which means you're not going to the right college. And so that pressure just keeps getting younger and younger. It just, obviously it's not healthy.
yeah, I mean that's actually something to be super straight up about. It, my high school is known for. My high school had a super high suicide rate, because it is just that boiling pot of pressure of like you need to succeed and this is how you're going to do it. And so I was fortunate. None of my friends struggled, or I'm sure they struggled, but no one like hurt themselves. But just last week, actually, a friend of a friend killed himself, and that was really tragic.
That is just awful. It's awful because at that age, I mean, is when we should be cultivating curiosity, a sense of freedom and experimentation and just exploring kind of who you are versus being so focused on a goal.
Well, yeah. I mean, the goal of, I mean, getting into a good school, sure, but really just like meeting your parents' expectations can be so consuming, and it can be really heartbreaking when like that isn't met. And I mean, I've been fortunate to have lived up to a lot of my parents' expectations. I'm going to school. I'm pursuing athletics. But I've a lot of like my closest friends from high school, or even middle school, elementary school, just totally burned out. They couldn't match the expectations, and so they turned to video games, or they turned to weed, or just kind of other vices of escape. And yeah, I mean that was always hard to see.
Yeah. And, you know, those expectations, I think, even if they're not spoken, are felt, right?
Yeah,
Because we know that with parenting, that it's the role modeling that people really see versus more so than the words that we say and speak. And so those expectations have been internalized from, you know, childhood, very young age. I know that it's something that affected me my whole life. Fortunately, I feel like it made me stronger as a person. However, every person responds to things so differently. And depending on what type of personality and support system and other outlets you have, um, you know, is really going to be a key factor in what ultimately happens in those situations.
totally. I mean the sports system, or sorry, the support system is huge. And for me that was completely youth sports. Um, Having teammates, having friends that I saw regularly, like every day, twice a day, which you can see it as some form of like overcommitment. Maybe it was too much that I was missing after school activities to go swim in fourth grade. But having that community and having that support system, I think was everything for me.
Yeah, I think, you know, I talk about it in other episodes that with young men, especially, when you have something in common and have a goal, like sports, like your swim team, uh, you find incredible support amongst young men. Outside of those types of activities or common interests, it is much more difficult for young men to find that connection, the emotional connection, and that support when compared to women. Women tend to have more of those emotional connections and that natural support for others versus with men it happens and we see it when they share a common goal or have an interest, whether it be a sports team or a faith group or something like that. So it's so important in um, the phase of development for young men.
Totally. I mean, you see it modeled with women a lot. This summer I watched The Summer I Turned Pretty, with my sisters, and the main character in that show had this great mentor, in the form of a family friend's mom. But I don't think you see that modeled with young men nearly as much. I think there's still this preconceived, this archaic notion that like if it's an older man, or like an older man taking an interest in a kid, especially a male, a boy, who's not their kid, uh, like that it's somehow pedophilic. Um, and I think that really kind of needs to be dispelled, and pushed aside, because I I wish that I got closer with like some of my friends' parents, because they're doing amazing stuff in fields I'm interested in. Um, but I just never engaged outside of activities.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you raise, Evan, because we are trying to change the story and we're expecting men to take on new behaviors. However, the social expectations more broadly haven't changed. And so the perception and how we respond as a society to things like that, um, don't really reinforce the behaviors that we say we want to see. And unfortunately, there are bad actors, that are men and women, right? And we also know that when there is abuse, or if there is any kind of sexual abuse in particular, it's usually from people that you know. And
Yeah.
so it's a really tricky one. And I'm glad you brought that up. So back to your parents. So they both met at Stanford, and your dad works for Stanford. Is that right?
Yeah. He's a radiologist in the med school, but he also teaches. He's really passionate about teaching. And, actually just the other day I went to him because I'm in an anatomy class, and he taught anatomy for like 10 years. And I was like, I'm really struggling. And then together we logged online, and did a participation quiz and got 3 out of 5. Um,
the two of you did it together, you and your dad?
yes, we did it together. And then like didn't score that well, which has been a point of jest recently. But yeah, he's a teacher, aside from his like clinical and research roles, and that's something he's really passionate about.
Great. So, how did that conversation go with your parents when you were deciding where to go to school?
Well, that's the thing. Say what you will about their parenting technique, but they were very hands off when I was going through the recruitment process. Which, by the way, an amazing way to do it. Instead of doing a regular college app like all of my friends, I was flying to the East Coast every other weekend to go look at schools who wanted me to come there. Um, but I still had this crushing pressure of where do I go to school? Where do I spend the next 4 years? And I really didn't have someone to talk to about that because my parents were so hands off. There were signs that like my dad wanted me to go to Stanford, for instance, but they wouldn't come out and say that. And so one day, after having tried everything, having done cold showers, having talked to friends of like parents, friends of friends, I just came home after a long conversation with my high school rowing coach because I think he was probably my main mentor at the time, and he rowed for Cal. I came home one day, I was like, Mom, I'm going to Cal. And that was it.
And how did that conversation with your coach influence you? Why was it such a important part of your decision-making process?
Well, I think the thing was he was my model at the time. Here was someone who had a like business on the side, was spending his spare time and a good amount of it too to help lead myself and my teammates in this thing that he was so passionate about, and I found so rewarding. And I was like, I think subconsciously or very consciously maybe, I wanted to be like him. And so the conversation was something along the lines of like, hey, I'm struggling to figure out where I want to go to school. And he said to me, when I met you, it was because you had kind of peaked at swimming. You'd reached your limit and you weren't finding satisfaction because you weren't able to compete at the highest level. Cal, out of all of your options for rowing, is the one that's going to allow you to compete to win. And I think him having that insight, having known me for long enough, having known that's what I was looking for, really made it so much easier to go to my parents and kind of explain my decision.
I wonder, was there a little bit of your kind of desire to have your own path, maybe to do something that was a little different? I'm just wondering, given kind of what you said about all the pressure and all of the generational history at Stanford.
I mean, totally. That was something my friends and I would talk about, because it was a lot of faculty kids. out of all the schools in America, one school has the highest admissions rate to Stanford, and that's Bing Preschool, because that's the preschool all the faculty send their kids to. And so
That's
they're
an interesting fact. So if anyone wants to go to Stanford, send your kids to what preschool?
Bing Preschool. It's also
Okay.
a lovely preschool. They have amazing sandboxes and arts. It's exactly what you'd expect. Um, but yeah, I mean that like Stanford was the charted path. Um, and some kids did really well. Some kids would go to Stanford, spend 4 more years at home. Even a friend of mine spent his last 2 years living at home just to save on the rent. And he did great. But other kids, I think, would go to Stanford because it was the charted path, and really struggle. And so I didn't know where I would end up, obviously. But a lot of my conversations with peers was around this idea of taking the preconceived, the charted path, or trying to find something new. And obviously, I didn't end up that far away, but
Yeah,
um,
it's not far, but you went against potentially some level of an expectation. And even if it isn't across the country, being in a different city in a new environment, that does push you. And it does create a different experience.
totally. I mean, I'm having a very different experience than my younger sister who did go to Stanford, and my other sister who goes to school at Scripps in LA. And so, actually, something we've enjoyed connecting over recently has been kind of comparing and contrasting our different college experiences.
So, what have you learned about yourself, kind of as you went away to school and made this decision to go to a school that wasn't necessarily what's their is it cardinal?
Yeah, the Cardinal.
You were born to be a cardinal, and you are a bear. So, how has that experience been for you, and what have you learned from that experience?
It's a very personal one, because it's not necessarily something where I mean both schools offer phenomenal education, phenomenal experiences, phenomenal athletics, but really it was that decision to move away from home and kind of start becoming my own person, um, that I think was so pivotal.
And what are some of those insights?
Okay, yeah. I think moving away from home has really taught me the value of my family, having that support network. Because by end of high school, I was like, I am so ready to get out of here. Like, I don't like the way you guys do this, that, and this and the other thing. Uh, but having gone away to school, it's like I like my house isn't that bad, but sometimes it's a pigsty, and it's like, Mom, like, can I drive the hour and a half home to have a home cooked meal and sleep in a made bed? Um, and so I think I've just realized the value of having their support, not just for those small things, but also to like weigh decisions, to bounce ideas off of. When it comes to career stuff, and we'll talk about that later, they've been a resource that I've kind of started with. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think moving out of the house and living on your own gives you perspective. Um, I'm still waiting for the day when my kids come back and have, I think, that aha moment. But it definitely gives you perspective when uh, live out on your own and you realize, okay, there was a method to the madness.
totally. I have a much greater appreciation for a lot of the operations and organization between my home life, which felt awfully chaotic in high school.
Got it. So we had a chance to talk a little bit, and I know that you are a biology major. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm still deciding between integrated biology and microbial, cell biology. But
Okay. Do you want to take a moment to explain to everybody what those two things are?
the integrated biology program is more of a breadth approach, to biology. So they both produce a lot of pre-med majors, or people interested in working in health fields. Integrated biology is broader. It covers more natural sciences. whereas microbiology covers more of the DNA cellular level.
So when you went to college and picked a major, were you thinking you were going to follow the path of your dad and be a doctor?
Not at all. To be honest, I really jumped around my first couple of years. I looked at doing an English major because I really like reading. I really like writing. I looked at doing a math major even just because I thought it was broad and flexible. And I really find the problem solving rewarding. But then I kind of just settled in biology as I took more classes I was interested in. But, and you'll find this interesting, whereas going to Cal was in some ways a response to my dad's expectation that I would go to Stanford, something I've been working on when it comes to my major and whether I'm going to go to medical school or not, or whether I even apply and go down that route, is trying to remove him as an influencing factor. Um, 'cause I do
So
come
he
from
so
it.
he must have like saved his chips for input until now. So he was kind of hands off during the college process, and now he's wanting to have a little more influence. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if he's necessarily cashing chips either way, but as a model, he failed to convince me to go to Stanford, but I do see a lot of the value he's found in the medical profession.
So, we spent some time, which I really enjoyed having some conversations with you about, and we talked a lot about your, um, your kind of process in terms of figuring out what you want to do, life after college, which I applaud you for thinking about that right now, because there is life after college and life after rowing. So, at that point, I think you were just thinking about networking. How do I go about it? How can I learn more from, other people on what I want to do? And so I'd love to kind of get an update from you from those conversations and maybe share a little bit of the detail of how have you approached it and what did you think you should be doing versus what you have found to be maybe more beneficial.
Yeah, sure. So I was living with Conor. I was training with him. We would talk a lot about was kind of the future, as a lot of I'd say young men, young adults my age do. And he had you on the other end, and so he would reflect your ideas back onto us, and we would discuss them. And finally, the two of us just connected. And
Which I actually love that that happened because, as a parent, like most of the time, I think information is going in one ear and out the other. So to know that he was taking what I was sharing with him and then discussing it with you, I don't know if he was maybe looking for some validation to see, like, is that really a good idea or not? Like testing it on you or not? But regardless, I'm glad that it ended up in some further conversation. Like, I'm going to take that as a win.
I think you should totally take it as a win. I mean, not necessarily he agreed with everything, but by and large, they were things he was internalizing, and we would talk about it. But having finally connected with you, I think it was that 1 hour conversation totally reoriented not necessarily my career, but the way I'm approaching it, and the way I'm approaching learning about potential avenues, whether it's technology or other stuff. I think a lot of like career exploration nowadays has kind of turned into this parasocial activity where it's a lot like school and you're just supposed to like go about learning about what does it mean to be a doctor? What does it mean to be a consultant? What is wealth management? What is this? What is that? And I think it's kind of lost its depth that way. And so in our conversation, it was, I went in.
And just back up a little bit when you say that. Just describe what does that really look like for you when you say it was a parasocial experiment, like or like it was school. Tell the audience like what does that really mean? What does that look like?
Sure. I mean, so my sophomore year, I thought I wanted to choose between an internship or doing like a U-23 program. And I my way of going about that was like, hey, these were the resources provided by my school. And so I spent a ton of time like editing my resume for applications on Handshake. Um, or even just applications on LinkedIn, Indeed. And so I filled out maybe 100 of these and just got no results, as should be expected. I mean, I have no experience. I didn't know anybody, but that's just how I thought it was done. Um, and so we had this conversation around like connecting with people and starting to figure out what I want to do that way. And it was really funny because I didn't come into this conversation thinking that was going to be the conversation. I thought I was going to ask you about your career, the things you've done, and see if I thought that was a good fit for me. But it totally morphed into this beautiful thing that was like, I think you figured out really quickly I didn't know how to talk to someone over the phone. And instead of like trying to put the phone down a little quicker, you took the time to kind of guide me through that. And I think that was hugely beneficial to me and just the way I'm approaching everything now.
Yeah, I mean, I do think things have changed so much since the days when I was applying for a job. And I think that in our lives, technology is wonderful. It's given us a lot of access to information, it gives us a ton of speed in many ways. And I think like anything, it can't be everything. And in some ways, I feel like we have moved into this space where we don't think that we should talk to anybody. And the truth is that, when you look at LinkedIn and people are sending invitations to connect or what have you, I click on every one of them and just, accept them because I don't have the time to actually go look to see if I am really connected or if I know this person or what have you. So therefore, I don't really know these people. And if somebody called me that actually that I knew, like you, so I had a phone call with you, then I am more than willing to spend time talking to you or anybody I really know or someone that I know through a second or third degree of a relationship to talk about my career, to talk about what they're interested in, to share my lessons learned, any advice, to try to think of connections or other avenues for them to build a relationship. And that human connection, I think, is so important. And I feel like in many ways we have lost that.
Oh, hugely. I mean, it's something I think about a lot because you see it on college campuses with a lot of people being really isolated. And it's not even just in a career thing. It's more broad, more socially. People, I think tech has this way of finding needs and then trying to solve them, but it can't do everything. Like it kind of takes the friction out of getting to know people, or it takes the friction out of meeting people, where it's like LinkedIn, you get that chime, that super visceral chime. Um, and you didn't actually like connect with that person. It just says you did.
Right.
Like you couldn't tell them anything. You wouldn't be able to know anything about them other than what they have on that page. Um,
Right.
but
And it's an inundation of information also. I think that's the other problem, right? Because yes, you've got information and it's there available, but if you're being inundated by information, it's really hard to know, is this a connection that I really want to be connecting with, or is it just another one of these random connections that the frictionless way of addressing it is to just accept it.
totally, totally. I mean, I have they told us to get in our career class to get to 500 plus on LinkedIn, um, and now I have that number, and I doubt I could tell you even 100 people, um, because I just don't keep track.
So let's dig in a little more. So when we spoke, we really talked about how to think about building your network and to start with people that you know that you have great resources with your parents and your dad in particular. And it's not just stopping there with your dad, but with his friends and people he knows and coaches that you've worked with and teammates that you have. And so as you start building that list, you can see how it just continues to grow and how impactful that can be if you are clear about what you are wanting to ask them or talk to them about. So maybe you can reflect and share kind of what you learned from that process.
Totally. I mean, our conversation was kind of a linchpin for me in that way. Because you telling me that people want to help me, that I'm not a nuisance to them, but they're perfectly willing to take the time to talk to me, and a lot of people enjoy that. Totally helped me. And so I approached a bunch of different networks of mine and started using them, and I didn't even realize they were there. Friends of friends, parents' friends, friends' parents, and then my team network. So team alums who we have a database and I can see what they're doing, just reaching out to them. And they're super happy to talk to me because they want to know what the team is doing. And it was just great. And from every conversation, I learned something, whether it's talking to a friend's dad who's an orthopedist and works in sports medicine. I found that super cool. Or even talking to your friend, who, by the way, gave me a great networking tip. When I ask if they know anyone else at the end, he said, you should ask for a couple, because then even if they think, shoot, I don't really know, they think to themselves, well, I can at least get you one. That was a great tip.
Absolutely. And I think, what you said, I really want to kind of emphasize is I think being a young adult, you think, well, why would these people want to talk to me? They're busy or they have so much more experience than me or, or this or this or that, right? We can come up with a million excuses or not excuses. We can think of lots of different reasons why we think they might not be interested.
Totally.
And it is completely the opposite. Is first of all, the first rule of thumb in life is people love to talk about themselves. So that's number one. So you got that going for you. Number two, when you're reaching out to people that have more experience, because that's who you want to learn from, people that have experience want to pay it forward or they want to share their experience, because I think fundamentally everyone recognizes they didn't get to where they are on their own. They got there because somebody was willing to help them. I know that I take that extremely seriously. I have had an amazing career experience, and I am 100% grateful and aware that that was not solely based on myself, my skills, my experience, or anything like that. It was because I had met wonderful people who were willing to help me and who truly cared and were willing to invest in me. And most people, I have never in my, when I was in that phase of my career, reaching out to people, I have never, and I'm telling you, this is 100% true. I have never reached out to somebody and they said no, or they didn't respond. Every single person that I reached out to based on a true connection or a referral from somebody that I knew responded and was willing to take the call. And to your point, I learned something or I had some takeaway that I found to be very meaningful. So I think it's really important for young people to know that you have so many more resources and people that are out there that are willing and able and excited to talk to you and to try to help you.
Yeah, it's so hard to ask for help though. I still struggle with it because I don't know why, but I still see like career and money as this sort of like zero sum game, where it's like if I ask someone for help, I need to be able to offer them something in exchange. Um, and I guess shifting away from that mentality and realizing like that's not the case, that they want to help, that the reward for them is in helping, has been, I mean, not a frictionless shift, but a really helpful one when it comes to giving myself some agency around figuring out what I want to do.
Well, and I think, Evan, the other part of it is that when you start doing that, then what you take away is that in the future, when someone reaches out to you, you will be willing to help, right? So that's kind of, I think, where this cycle begins, is people that are helping you are helping because they had that experience, or they feel that that's something that will bring them some level of joy and satisfaction, and then you are able to pass it on in the future as well.
Yeah. When you say that, it actually reminds me of the way sometimes my mom will connect me with high schoolers who are curious what Berkeley's like. And that's
100%.
an opportunity to do that. And
And
being,
when that happens, do you ever go like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, that's so inconvenient or what have you. You're like excited. You want
yeah,
to
are you
talk to,
kidding me? 30
right?
minutes to go talk about myself? Like,
Well, that's exactly what I'm telling you. People love talking about themselves. And I think the more you can remember that you're not a burden, you're not asking for something, you're really, it's a mutually beneficial relationship in that process.
yeah, totally. Um,
So how are things progressing for you? Like, so where are you in your latest and greatest on your journey for thinking about life after Cal, life after rowing?
okay, well, I don't have it figured out at all, but I feel more confident in approaching it. I don't want my rowing to be limited to my 4 years of college. I think I want to try to do grad school and row while doing that. So I'm looking at programs at Oxford and Cambridge for that. Um, and I'm trying to talk to people more and cultivate those relationships. And so one thing that I did after we talked was I reached out to my old assistant high school basketball coach, who was there for me in high school, who I hadn't really talked to, but had this fantastic career in marketing and in consulting. And so where I'm between like medicine and maybe a more business facing role, um, talking to him has been a super great resource. And then the other day, he sent me an email of like 10 people he knew who he thought would all be happy to talk to me with all of these different careers in and around healthcare and business. And so
I love it.
reaching out to them. And it really kind of builds up to this thing where it's like, I just need to figure out how to pace myself.
That is the beauty of that is real networking, is getting with people that you actually know and people that are invested in you, and for them to start then introducing you to others. And what a great time for you right now to really explore. I mean, these are the years where you should be exploring. It's really hard in your early 20s to be so focused, right? To say, okay, this is what I want to do. And that alone is so much pressure. And, I think a lot of times when you think about a career, it's a matter of eliminating things too, right? It's just figuring out, okay, these are things that I maybe are not as interested in. Here's some area that I want to think about some more. And here's some things that I know that I really am interested in. And so it's great that you're giving yourself that time and space to really kind of dig into that some more.
Having those conversations has been really helpful in even structuring what I want to think about when it comes to a career. Because, I was just thinking about like, do I like solving problems or do I like talking to people? But there's a whole nother host of considerations. Like, what do I want my life to look like? How much work do I want to do? Do I want to be home in the evening? Do I want to travel all the time? And I don't think I have to have those questions figured out. That's another thing. People are super quick to say, I didn't know what I was going to do till I graduated and someone gave me a job here. And maybe that's how it'll work out. But having their insight into what a different industry looks like might help me on whether or not I want to take that job or what kind of jobs I want to be asking about.
Well, it points you in the right direction. And definitely what I would say is all of these decisions sound like, big monumental decisions. And not to minimize it, they are big decisions and they aren't. Because a decision to go down one path and take a job does not lock you into that job forever. You take the job, you take what you can, and you grow and learn from it. And by taking that job, even if it was nothing to do with what you thought you wanted to do, you're going to learn a ton because you've never had that job before. You go in and you learn it, and that opens up a whole nother world of opportunities, which may include, I know I don't want to do this anymore. Or it includes building relationships with other people that you met through that job. Or you're in a company and you can leverage other departments and explore what other aspects that company is involved in. So it just opens up so many different channels, and every decision you make leads you to a point where you can make another decision.
Totally. That was one thing a lot of the doctors I've talked to, because that's the route I'm exploring, have harped on, is just because you go to medical school doesn't mean you need to be a clinician. And it's hard because I think about things in such a linear step-by-step manner. And maybe that's because things are very linear up until a point. It's you need to do this in order to get into college, at least where I grew up. But kind of, I feel like people have to hit me over the head with that perspective. But it's finally starting to get beat in.
And I think you're right. I think that up until college, it is pretty straightforward, right? You're going to go to school from kindergarten to 12th grade, and you got to get grades, you got to take some tests, and you apply, and then you go to college, and you still are pretty much, it's a very structured environment. You have some choices, but you kind of are told, here are the classes you need to take. Here's the number of credits you need to fulfill, and here are the minimum grades you need to achieve. And so for most of your life, up until that point, you're going down a pretty structured path. And now there's a big world out there, and you're like, how do I navigate that? Where do I start? And so I agree that it is because there's been so much more structure in the world, in the life that you've been living up until now.
Yeah, completely.
So I want to switch gears a little bit because I know you're a big reader, and you recommended a book to Conor, which I've never seen him so excited about a book ever, quite honestly. So tell me more about your love for reading.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's a gift from my mom. My mom's always been a big reader. Her mom was a huge reader, and so that's something that just kind of got passed on to me, and so great. I don't know how to explain it fully, but just I read before bed every night, and I can't go to sleep if I don't read. And so that's
a great habit, because most people look at their phones before they go to bed and can't go to sleep without doing that, which is really not the best way to fall asleep.
Oh yeah, I know. My dad does that. So I mean, there you have it. Opposites attract. But yeah, I mean, I really love it. It gives me an opportunity to see a lot of the perspective we talk about. Although I don't actually have to talk to anyone. But yeah, recommending Conor Barbarian Days was a highlight. The actual act of recommending it, because it was just such a good fit for a book for him. Because this guy had basically found this like super special place that Conor loves to go. And it's all about surfing, which he's super into. And it's just this crazy story that's actually this guy's life. And it was awesome because it gave me and Conor something to talk about on a level of depth that wasn't rowing, or you and your career stuff. Which
were probably the primary topic, right? You guys were rowing every day and talking about careers and internships and things like that. And to your point, I mean, the book is about Tavarua Island in Fiji. And we're very fortunate to go to Tavarua for about 9 years in a row. And he would call and talk about, oh my gosh, they're talking about Chief Druku and Cloudbreak and all these things. And, so it was definitely something that he had a lot of passion about.
Yeah. I mean, what a like moment of fate that I was able to put those two together, because that book really like hinges on Tavarua, and Conor loves it. And to see the photos, it honestly was super rewarding for me because he could show me photos of this place I'd only read about, which was so cool.
Yeah, I just I'd love to hear a little more about some of these conversations you guys had, because the two of you really did go deep in a lot of things about life in terms of, living life and getting more experience just in general. And then I know you talked a lot about social media. So tell me about those two things and why those things came up and how important they are to you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it happened organically, just in conversation. But for a long time for me, and this goes back to my answer of the "Would you rather" question, is one way I like to think about structuring my life on a really high level is I want to lead a memoir-worthy life, because I've grown up reading all of these books, just loving them, all the different ways and perspectives. And so when I think about what I want to do in life, I don't know, but I want to do it to a level of extent that other people would be interested and that I'd be able to write about it. And so we talk about that, and we talk about how social media in some ways is the complete antithesis of that. It's okay, here's something you're going to look at for 2 seconds. You're going to click, you're going to like, I'm going to feel satisfied because it's like, like Conor saw my post, let's go. And then I'm going to forget about it. And we're both going to forget about it. And no one actually gained anything, because there was no friction. And I think maybe that's what I love about these memoirs so much, is that there's so much friction to these things where you just hear the accomplishment. And you really get to see that in these books.
So tell me about the social media challenge that you guys had this summer.
Great. Yeah. So for our program, we had to do work hours. So each week we would do like 10 hours of work, and that covered our room and board.
And when you say work, it was like plowing the fields and building fences and, housekeeping and stuff like that, right?
Fencing, dishwashing, wood stacking,
Manual labor.
Manual labor, not the most enjoyable, fun with friends, but it could get quite tedious. I spent a lot of time with the weed whacker. So that gives you an idea.
Well, you got a skill set now.
Yeah. I guess there's that. But the challenge was this. So we were sitting at the table, and I was watching Conor scroll. I don't have Instagram, so I kind of like watching him scroll. And I said, Conor, can I see your screen time? And he was at something like 4 hours a day, which, mind you, in middle of nowhere, Vermont, and even among like our population, is pretty good time. I think we average like 8 hours a day or something wild like that. But I was like, that is a whole lot of time to be spending on your phone. I'll bet you 10 work hours you can't get under 1 hour a day. And he shook my hand on it. And so we had this bet. And fortunately for me, he just barely popped at the last minute. But he did have like an hour in there that was just like filming me rowing. And so we eventually just agreed to kind of let the deal
Make it a wash.
make it a wash. Yeah. But it was kind of a fun experiment for the both of us. Um,
I think both of you guys challenged each other in different ways. Right? That story is a great segue into some questions that I ask every guest. So, what's one stereotype you've heard about young adults your age that you'd like to dispel?
I think there's this weird conception that we like being on our phones, that like we're screenagers, that this is just like the way we do things. And people like give their kids iPads or whatever because they think they're gonna make super babies. But it's something we just don't like at all, actually. For a lot of us, I think we see it as a vice. And we struggle to connect with other people to kind of figure out our lives because we do have this like digital pacifier in our hand. And so I think this idea that we choose to be screenagers, that these devices aren't designed to have us on them constantly, is a total bust, a total miss for society.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think after your social media experiment, I mean, Connor started to want to investigate my phone and my screen time, which I was a bit in protest. So I think you're right that it's not necessarily true that all the young adults are necessarily attached to their phones.
Totally. I mean, they are tools. They're great tools, but a lot of the time, like we can be reliant on them.
Yeah. So, what are the three most important things you look for when you consider a job, a company, or a career?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's impact. I think it's really important to me that I'm having a net positive impact on the world. And whether that be directly through my career or outside of it, I don't totally know yet, but I'd like it to be through my career. Connecting with other people, actually working with people, um, and then it being something I'm passionate about, something that I really want to know more about, something kind of like rowing, where it's something I wake up and I'm excited to do every day, because it's this harmonious problem with who I am, and attacking it makes me happy.
All right, great. So, I've got some questions about young men. What do you think it means to be a man?
I think for me, and I've listened to a lot of rhetoric around this area that's kind of changed my approach to it. Growing up, I thought being a man meant being strong. It meant being fast. It meant being better than other people. Um, Now I've kind of taken the gal way, or the other, like maybe like Anna Lemke. I really like the approach that masculinity isn't this zero sum thing. It's not this you're better than someone, but it's actually the opposite. It's you are comfortable in who you are in such a way that you can help other people be more comfortable with who they are. Um, and so I think this idea of mentorship is actually um, inseparable from what it means to be a man. Um, that I think of like the men who I look up to for men, for like who they are. And it's those who are able to help other people.
Great. What do you think it means to be masculine?
Masculine, huh? I think it I think it's a confidence thing. I think masculinity to me is that guy can walk into a crowd, shake somebody's hand, get their name, and both parties will enjoy it. It's a pleasant exchange. Um, I think masculinity for me is confidence.
Okay, great. And how would you describe yourself?
Well, I think I'm not quite there yet, but I think I'm thoughtful and I think I'm working towards it. Um, I think I have a vague but clear picture of where I am and where I want to be. And I do think I have moments in my life where get to feel that really rewarding sense of someone's coming to me for help. And
Great.
yeah,
Awesome. What does supporting young men look like, in your opinion?
that's a big question. And I spend a lot of time thinking about that, actually. And I think it starts with encouraging men to connect with other people. Um, I think it's really easy to have this idea of men as people who, or especially boys, who are just going to like go do their thing on their own. And that's not the case at all. A lot of the time, that's like an outlet. It's they're struggling to find friends, they're struggling to make friends. And so I think a lot of the thinking around what needs to happen for young men needs to involve getting them talking, getting them connecting, getting them off their devices, getting them away from virtual friends and AI girlfriends, and into places where they can meet people and do things and like actually feel some sort of reward from like actions they're taking, not just passing the time.
Wonderful. What would you like to see change about the story about men?
I really want to see people take the time to think of men as people. Because I think we talk a lot about the objectification of women's bodies, but I think I mean, I don't want to draw parallels between two very different things, but there's this idea that men should be quantified in like other things, such as like, I mean, even like money and height, you know? And I think if people can pause and say like, here's someone who's more than all of these quantifiable details, that would be really great.
I think that's a great answer. Evan, thank you so much. I first just, appreciate getting to know you. And I think that you have shared such a great perspective around your thoughts around your career and how you're thinking through things. Also about the changing dynamics of being a young man. So I really appreciate all of your thoughts and the impact that you're making, even to your peers. I am rooting for you. And anytime you need to have a conversation about your career or anything like that, you know, you can reach out to me and I'm available and more than willing to talk to you about it more. So thanks for being on the show today. And I hope you have a great season. And you are more than right where you need to be.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you not only to look up to and connect with, but also to know that people who aren't young men are concerned about us. It's really nice to know that you're here for us, that you care about us, and to have people in our corner.
Well, that makes me feel really good. So thanks, Evan. Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode, and now it's your turn. Take what you heard today and put it into action. Share this episode with a friend who's figuring life out too. And let's build a generation of leaders who lead with heart. Follow the show, leave a review, and connect with me on social so we can keep figuring it out together. See you next time.